When you say I'll do it later, what you're really saying is I don't want to feel this right now. You're just saying I don't want to sit through the emotional content that I'm going to be going through at this moment.
One could argue that the emotional aspect of starting something is probably one of the bigger factors in preventing people from starting.
It is one of the barriers for sure.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and again, sometimes we misconstrue procrastination to be more about time management, but it's not the case at all. It's not about organization or willpower or even laziness. A lot of times we like to say that people that don't do things are lazy. Well, it's not really laziness at all either. I would argue that procrastination is emotion management. So what we perceive as someone's inability to do something or struggle to start things, it's really about when we procrastinate, we're really managing our emotions rather than just being lazy and not doing something. So when we delay doing something, we're not avoiding the work. What we're doing is avoiding the feeling that comes along with starting the work. Are you tracking me to an extent so far?
I am. To sum it all up, it would be so nice if we didn't have emotions.
Well, that is true. However,
that must makes us human, though.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So today we're going to be talking about understanding the emotional physics of procrastination, all right, and learning how to move when emotion gets in the way.
Sure.
All right, so that's what we're going to focus on today. So let's kind of talk about the emotional regulation theory of procrastination. There's actually, and I'll nerd out a little bit, there's actually a theory that's been researched about, how emotional regulation plays a role in why we procrastinate. The vast majority of people, we procrastinate on something. Some of us are better at avoiding procrastination than others, but we all human beings have procrastinated at some point or another in life.
Right.
And really what it is, it's a mood management strategy. It's not a character flaw. A lot of times we equate a chronic procrastinator with somebody that perhaps has a character flaw, and that character flaw is a lack of diligence, a lack of being able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, those types of things.
Yep.
But really, it's about managing our mood. It has nothing really. I would argue it has nothing to do with our character or our ability to start things. It's more about how we respond to our emotions, and how we're feeling in the moment, and how we respond to those to our emotions, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So essentially, what the emotional regulation theory of procrastination states is that we avoid tasks to escape unpleasant emotions. What are those unpleasant emotions? Frustration, boredom. Big one is fear of failure.
Yep.
We're petrified. Most human beings are petrified of failing.
Right.
There's also guilt or shame associated with starting something and then being scared that we're not going to be able to finish it. So avoidance of the task or the project or the goal or whatever it is that we're procrastinating of, avoiding that feels like short-term relief, and it provides short-term relief, and the brain rewards that short-term relief. And when the brain rewards that short-term relief, the avoidance becomes reinforced. And so the result is temporary comfort, but long-term anxiety.
Long-term anxiety and pain, really.
Right. So when we avoid doing things that we know we're supposed to do or things that we want to do, it may feel better in the moment, but the expense of that temporary relief is, again, long-term hesitancy, long-term struggle, long-term anxiety that we may feel.
Sure.
And it just tends to build. It's a snowball effect. It builds over time.
Right.
So when you say I'll do it later, what you're really saying is I don't want to feel this right now. Right. When you're sitting in front of your computer, or you're sitting in front of a job site, or you're sitting with your spouse about to have a difficult conversation, when you say let's do this later, you're just saying I don't want to sit through the emotional content that I'm going to be going through at this moment.
And it's just going to get worse the longer you procrastinate on it.
That's the tough part is it does get worse, and everybody knows that.
Yeah.
We all know if we zoom out and we look at a situation, we know that if we don't deal with something in the moment that it happens or the moment it's presented to us, it's just going to get worse later on.
Yep.
It's going to get worse from the standpoint that it won't be completed and we'll have a bigger problem to deal with. It'll get worse because we'll wish we had done it when we could have done it but didn't.
Right.
So there's going to be shame and guilt associated with it. So we all know that the longer we wait to do something, the worse it's going to become or the worse we're going to feel about ourselves. But what's important to remember is that our brain's rewards system is short-sighted. Okay? Our brain's reward system, it values relief of avoidance over the discomfort of effort. And so that's really what we're fighting about when we're talking about procrastination. It's more about responding to those emotions that we experience in the moment, because our brain is trying to avoid discomfort, but goal attainment or being productive or bettering our lives in some way will always involve some kind of discomfort, which our brain actively avoids.
How do you is there any way to actually look forward, teach your mind to look forward to discomfort?
I don't know if you can really look forward to discomfort. I think we have to acknowledge that it exists is the big piece.
Or maybe
I think we can be curious about it, and we'll talk about that in a bit.
Sure.
I think if we approach it with an idea of being curious about why we're avoiding something, that's a big step in the right direction of understanding how our minds work, and then understanding what our tendencies are, and that our tendency is, and then adjusting going forward.
Sure.
So let's kind of look at physiologically how our brain does this. Physiologically, when we avoid something or chronic avoidance, it lowers stress hormones and amygdala activity. The amygdala is a structure of our brain, and it lowers the amygdala activity for a moment. So that avoidance actually, in the moment, feels successful to us to some extent.
Yep.
But that micro hit of comfort teaches the brain that not starting equals safety. So remember how we talked about a lot of times on here that our brain is trying to keep us safe.
Yep.
And our brain interprets comfort as safety, particularly in modern life. And we're definitely a comfort culture. And so we've been conditioned to seek out comfort above all else. It's kind of the big challenge of our time is as more advanced as we have become as a society, the more comfort focused we have become. And so the less able we are to do the difficult things.
Sure.
So when we avoid hard things, we do feel comfortable. We feel more comfortable, right? Sitting on the couch, watching Netflix for hours on end is much easier than reading a self-help book or studying for an exam that you have come up or starting that report that you know is due. Avoiding those in the moment feels like success because we are comfortable. But that micro hit of comfort, again, teaches the brain that not starting equals safety. And therein is the problem, is it snowballs over time.
Right, yeah.
For example, let's kind of take it down to a simpler level, or a simple example, I should say. Have you ever noticed when somebody is avoiding something that they know they have to do, suddenly they start to engage in all this busy work?
Yes, I see it all the time.
Yeah. So, for example, you may decide to reorganize the fridge suddenly, rather than sending that difficult email. Right.
I can relate to that. There have been some difficult emails I had to send out or difficult calls I've had to make, and I would put it off just because I'm like, one, I don't feel like I'm ready for it, and two, I'm like, I just don't want to deal with the fallout that I know is going to happen, and so push it off. I mean, you still got to do it anyway. So why not just rip the Band-Aid off and just do it?
Yeah. Or every once it's the coworker that suddenly gets the itch to reorganize their entire office when they're facing a deadline for a major project. Suddenly they're inspired to reorganize their office space, and that's really.
I can confirm that I don't have that issue.
No, you don't have that issue, but probably not.
That's why my office is so messy.
Right. So
that's my avoidance right there.
But it's an avoidance activity, right? You're doing something that's easier and makes you feel productive, even though you're clearly putting off what you had to be doing at that moment.
Yep.
So that moment of comfort and control feels good, until that email still needs to be sent, or until that report is due and you have somebody asking you where it is. So that comfort is very short-lived, and it eventually comes back to bite us. So next time you catch yourself avoiding something, ask, what emotion am I avoiding, not what task? So I would argue that it's not the task that we're avoiding, or it's not the project that we're avoiding, or it's not the actual act that we're trying to avoid. It's the emotion that's attached to that. that we're trying to avoid.
Yeah.
We a lot of times are trying to avoid being uncomfortable in a situation. So let's talk about the emotional cost of avoidance. It's important to note that avoidance reduces anxiety now, but increases it later. And we've kind of mentioned that a little bit. It's kind of that snowball effect. What starts as relief will typically end as guilt. So you had a project that you're supposed to be working on, or that email you're supposed to send. Each delay adds a layer of emotional interest. Okay, every time you delay a task, the future you inherits the now me's discomfort plus shame. Did you follow me there? So
yeah,
in the moment, avoidance stabilizes our emotions to an extent. It makes us feel better. But really what you're doing is you're kicking the can down the road to your future self. Have you ever heard that term where someone's faced with a challenging situation or a difficult event or a decision, and they say, well, that's something for future me to figure out?
Yes,
right?
I have
that's
heard
just
that.
kicking the can down the road to future you.
Yep.
And the future you inherits not only that anxiety or that discomfort, but also the shame of not having done it before.
So you get dividends and interest.
Exactly.
On that.
You're compounding the challenge.
It's the wrong kind of investment scheme there, people.
Some of our younger listeners, if there's any out there, may not relate to this, but it's kind of like paying emotional late fees every time you postpone. So if you remember when we would go to Mr. Movies growing up, or Blockbuster Video,
nostalgia.
They made most of their money off late fees.
Yeah.
Until they stopped having late fees, and then they went bankrupt. But they made a lot of money off late fees, and we kicking the can down the road and avoiding a task in the moment, it's like paying the emotional late fees, meaning the emotional discomfort we feel gets worse the longer we put something off. The other thing to keep in mind regarding the emotional cost of avoidance is that chronic avoidance erodes the trust that you have in yourself. It avoids self-trust. So it's like saying, I can't rely on myself to do what I say I will, which again makes us feel worse about ourselves. So what happens is that self-doubt then in turn compounds our resistance to the task. And so not only do we have a greater amount of shame and mistrust in ourselves, but that shame and mistrust actually emboldens or increases the resistance that we have to even starting the task in the first place. So you can see how we're taking an anthill and turning it into a mountain the more we avoid things.
Yeah, geez.
So again, avoidance doesn't remove emotion; it simply reschedules it. So it's very important to keep that in mind. It's in the same way that we try to reschedule. I used to, if ever I had a meeting I didn't like or wasn't looking forward to, I would tend to find a reason to reschedule it.
Oh, is that why we had to reschedule a lot of meetings?
Maybe.
Okay.
No. But it just, all it does when you're rescheduling something, it just moves the avoidance or it removes the discomfort you're feeling to a different date.
Yeah.
And again, our brain's central focus is to figure out how can I be comfortable right now? It doesn't really care about our future success or our future comfort. It cares about right now. And so it's going to do everything it can to avoid discomfort in the moment.
And a lot of times rationally, didn't mean to cut you off there.
Yeah, that's okay.
A lot of times rationally, we know that what we are doing or procrastinating on is going to make things worse.
We definitely intrinsically
know that.
Exactly.
Just like when I used to be when I was in college, I had a tendency to procrastinate until the last minute. A lot of people did.
Yep.
And I know this is bad for me. I know this is stressful. I know this is awful. And then I got really sick. I took about a year off, and then I went back to school. And told myself I'm going to completely flip the script.
Yeah.
And then instead of procrastinating, I don't know if you want to call it like reverse procrastination, but like as soon as I got an assignment or a report or research project that I had to do, I did nothing else but did that and got it done. And so I would be done like 2 weeks early.
Wow.
But then I go back and I'd rewrite the whole thing again because I'm like, well, because then my mind, I would have the less the stress relief, but then I would be nervous and stressed out again. Like, oh my gosh, I got this done too early. I need to look at it and do it again.
So Exactly. And when you started your project way early in the semester, right? You didn't start and do it all at once. You probably started small, and then you just kind of built on it over time. Once you made a goal of starting it, and once you started it, you found that it was much easier just to continue on doing it.
Oh yeah.
Right? And so again, it's that starting is what is the key to avoiding procrastination. And that's why starting small matters. Again, it's not about, you don't start small to be productive. You start small to rebuild trust in yourself as someone who moves through the discomfort. So again, our avoidance of starting tasks has nothing to do with the actual project that we don't want to do. It has to do with the discomfort and the emotional content that's attached to the task. So if we can start small, we're able to rebuild trust in ourselves that we're capable of moving through the discomfort. And what we find is that our brains are actually very emotionally flexible. And so to that end, let's talk about emotional flexibility a little bit. How do we move when we're feeling stuck? That's a big key. Is a lot of people that are procrastinating or having a hard time starting things, they feel stuck and they feel like they can't move forward in any way. So one of the keys to moving forward when you're feeling stuck in that way is to acknowledge instead of argue. Again, so rather than arguing with yourself about why you can't do something, it's important to acknowledge what's going on. And the key with acknowledgement is speaking truth. Sometimes we can glaze over things and we can actually be dishonest with ourselves, but it's important to state what's true. So for example, I'm anxious about this task, rather than saying, I can't do this task because of X, Y, and Z, but just stating, I'm anxious about it. That validation, actually, it's been found to reduce what we call limbic activity, and the limbic system is part of our reward centers in our brain.
Sure.
What it found is that validation reduces limbic activity, whereas arguing with an emotion amplifies it. Does that make sense?
This kind of like in a relationship, if someone wants to be heard. If they're not, if you don't acknowledge them, it gets that gets worse and worse and worse.
Escalates.
But just might as well acknowledge someone's hurt feelings or emotions or whatever right away.
Exactly.
And address it and deal with it.
Right.
And then you can move on.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. The next key to getting unstuck is to name the emotion, not the excuse. Right? We're very good at finding plenty of excuses. So, for an example, if you're faced with a lot of difficulty starting is related to feeling you're not capable. So just acknowledge that. I'm afraid this won't be good enough. Not, I don't have the time. People saying that I don't have the time is I may get some enemies here, is one of the biggest cop-outs ever.
Yeah. We all have 24 hours.
We all have the same 24 hours in the day, right? So again, name the emotion that you're dealing with, not the excuse. So as I said in the example, I'm afraid this won't be good enough, rather than I don't have the time.
Yeah.
And actually, the research has also found that labeling emotions decreases their intensity by 30 to 40%.
That's wild.
Don't ask me how they measured the 30 to 40% intensity, but that's been researched. Yeah, science. Just trust the science, guys. Again, labeling emotions decreases their intensity 30 to 40%.
That's crazy.
It's the same thing as when you write something down, it doesn't seem as overwhelming, right? It just decreases the ambiguity.
And it actually can get out of your brain,
right?
So you can have more space for stuff that really matters and stuff that you can actually deal with.
That's how, frankly, that's the magic, not magic, but that's the power of talk therapy. When you think about it, they say half of talk therapy is just getting something out. And when you think about it, it seems really strange that just talking about something decreases its intensity, but when we talk about it and it gets out of our head into the space, we realize that the problem we're facing perhaps isn't as Herculean as we think it is.
Yeah.
It's not as massive as we think it is.
A little bit of a side note here. I've always found that it works a lot better if I write something down.
Sure.
Instead of type something down.
That is a whole different topic. That is the research is actually fascinating about is actually writing things down. It factually changes the brain chemistry about how we think about it.
That's crazy.
Why is that? Because when you think about when you're typing something, it's put in, for just as an example, it uses standardized font. It's kind of sterile. It's consistent, but it's sterile. Whereas your handwriting is your own stamp of, it's very personal.
Oh, I didn't think of it
that's
that
just an
way.
example of why it kind of works. And it forces the mind-body connection, whereas typing is an automatic response. Like we just know, it's like talking.
Right.
We just know how to do it.
Right.
Writing is much more personal. And so, as an example, that's why writing.
And it takes more time too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it forces you to process it in a much more efficient manner. Whereas when you're typing, you can just you can just dump everything in at once. Writing it out actually forces you to think about it, to deconstruct it, and to put it in words that make sense.
Yeah. Very interesting.
So another way to help us get unstuck is to shrink the emotional exposure. Okay, so another way to look at this is use graded exposure, and a very even simpler way to look at that is agree to do 5% of the task. All right. Again, we talked about it last week. Is set yourself up for success. So just agree to open the Word document. Just agree to open the Google Doc, or to sign into your email, for example. Just do those little 5% tasks, and then what happens is that those small wins show the brain that actually discomfort fades much faster than expected. Again, that's kind of gets back to the behavioral activation we were talking about last week, is start with the small tasks, agree to the small tasks, and then give yourself permission to quit when you're done if you want. But 90% of the times you'll find is once you've done those small tasks, the discomfort essentially disappears, or it fades to an extent, and then you're able to continue going.
Right.
The next way to kind of work through emotions is this process called reappraisal, not avoidance. What is reappraisal? It's really just reframing the discomfort that we're facing. So, for example, this anxiety means that I care, okay?
Right.
Rather than this anxiety means that I can't do it. No, it just means you intensely care about what you're about to do.
You want to
give
it your best.
Yep. Cognitive reappraisal, it rewires the emotional association with the effort that you're about to put in. So rather than, the example I use is this anxiety means I care, typically when we face discomfort, we ascribe a failure-based idea to it. So I don't want to do this. I'm uncomfortable that I'm going to do this because I feel like I can't do it. And you can see how saying something like this anxiety means that I care really flips the script on that.
Yeah, it does. It does.
So the whole goal is to rewire the emotional association with that effort. The last tip I kind of mentioned is take what's called a self-compassion break. All right. I think it's, if we can understand that avoidance, procrastination, discomfort is actually a shared experience, then it becomes not as scary to participate in. So, for example, just say to yourself, this is a hard moment. Everybody struggles with avoidance, believe it or not. And I give myself permission to try again. We've all heard the cliches that failure is just a learning environment, right?
It is, yeah.
Give yourself permission to try again. It doesn't mean it has to be perfect the first time. Don't let perfection be the enemy of progress.
Well, and just like I've always said, failing forward is so important, so vital.
Right.
It's something that I still struggle with it, but, always look at failure as a learning experience and a growth opportunity.
Right.
So you can do the thing better.
Exactly.
Yep.
And it's important to note that emotion doesn't disappear when you start. It just changes form. We are emotional beings. All human beings are emotions. So emotions don't disappear when we start doing a task. They just kind of change form. So if you can carry it with you, it stops being a wall that becomes weight. It becomes a weight you can move with. All right. So
sure.
Rather than facing a wall or butting your head against a wall, suddenly the discomfort just becomes a weight that you can move with and get comfortable moving with over time.
Sure.
So let's talk a little bit about the motion of beginning before we kind of get to the close here. Sometimes we have a fear of identity shift. Okay, and it's important to keep that in mind as well. Sometimes starting a task or starting a project or starting an endeavor challenges who we believe ourselves to be. Avoidance protects our identity as much as it avoids failure. All right, let me say that again. Starting challenges who we believe ourselves to be. Avoidance protects identity as much as it avoids failure. So let's kind of zoom out away from productivity a little bit and kind of look at somebody that's depressed. one of the biggest challenges with depression is people that have been chronically depressed for a very long period of time, they take on the belief that they are a depressed person. They no longer are a person that struggles with depression. They are a depressed person. And so now you can see, rather than depression being a weight that the person has to carry, depression has become a wall that they can't get past. And
they're saying that they are depression. Like,
they are a person that they are a depressed person. Yep, it becomes a character trait of them. And I'm not saying everybody with depression, but when that is their identity, engaging in a task that would counter that identity or change that identity is a big challenge for them. Because if you do something different, like behavioral activation, which is very effective for depression, they are then challenging what they believe themselves to be. And that can be very scary for us, because our brains, again, try to keep us safe. They try to keep our equilibrium stable, and attacking our identity is a big component to keeping us safe.
Yeah.
And so the fear of identity shift is a very big thing. It plays a big part in the emotion of beginning something.
So we just got to be really careful on how we talk to ourselves and how we identify with things that we're struggling with.
Right. The next thing that impacts the emotion of beginning is what I call liminal energy. And that's really just that there's this space between the old and the new that is inherently uncomfortable. All right. That restless energy is what crossing the threshold feels like. So whenever we're starting a task or a project or a goal or whatever have you, there's going to be that space between the old version of ourselves and the new version of ourselves. And that space in between the old and the new is always going to be uncomfortable, because it entails growth. Growth is always uncomfortable, regardless of the form it takes. So that restless energy, we have to figure out how to cross that border and be able to manage that discomfort that we feel in that messy middle. The next piece of identifying the emotion of beginning is starting as data gathering. So what I mean by that is to shrink the emotional states. All right. For example, say to yourselves, I'm not committing, I'm collecting data. So this kind of gets back to being curious about why you feel a certain way about it. So when you're anxious about starting a task, rather than judging yourself, well, I just can't start anything, right? That's judging yourself. Be curious about, well, I wonder why I feel that way. Why do I feel anxious about this? And again, that moves into, it changes from passing judgment on ourselves to acknowledging that the discomfort exists and then wondering why it exists. And as you know, any research or learning or growth starts with asking a question. If we ask questions about ourselves, we're much more inclined to learn about ourselves and to become better people. Next is self-compassion. I call it self-compassion in motion. Think of compassion as emotional lubrication, all right? It keeps the gears grinding when things feel hard. And what do I mean by compassion? I'm really talking about having compassion on yourself. Giving yourself grace when things don't go exactly as planned, that it's okay, that you're going to be okay. And that can kind of keep the gears grinding from when things feel hard. The last tip I'd mention about that'll help us kind of deal with the emotions that are associated with beginning is know that action is actually a vote for the kind of person you're becoming. Now, if you know you're reading in popular culture, you'll know who that's from. I'm not going to put you on the spot. It's James Clear. Okay. James Clear says, and he's, for those of you that don't know, James Clear is a person that wrote Atomic Habits, which is, I believe, the most best-selling book for the past however many years. Ever since he wrote it, it's been on the bestseller list.
It makes so much sense.
He says that whenever you engage in an action, you're actually voting for the kind of person you're becoming. And remember that inaction is also a vote, is also an action. It's also a decision. So if you're choosing to not do something, that's a vote for who you want to become.
Mr. Do Nothing.
In the same way that if you're acting on something, if you choose to move forward on something, that's also a vote for who you want to become in the future.
Mr. Do Something.
So again, example, each small beginning confirms your capacity for change. All right.
Whether we like it or not.
Exactly. Right. Yep.
We are going to be voting for ourselves no matter what.
Right.
So might as well make the right vote.
And we are just a product of our decisions.
Yeah.
Over time. Yeah. We are a product of decisions that we stack up over time.
That's both inspiring and also
intimidating.
And also, what's that?
Inspiring and intimidating.
Intimidating, and also can be kind of self-defeating too, because I mean, if you have a history of making non-decisions or no decisions, you can look back with regret and like, oh my gosh, what did I do with myself the last couple of years or whatever?
Yeah.
Like I didn't do anything.
Right.
So you got to be careful with it.
Yeah. And if we find you haven't done anything for years, that actually feeds on itself. Well, I haven't started anything now yet, so I might as well not start anything now, right?
Right.
And so it's the challenge is to overcome that.
And the opposite is true too.
Right. Correct. Everyone's got to start somewhere.
So choose your vote.
Right. Right. And again, so much of procrastination is emotional protection. Our feelings, which is our feelings trying to keep us safe from change. And again, to avoid sounding like a broken record, our minds resist change because it perceives change as being unsafe or being associated with risk.
Mm-hmm.
Once you see those emotions as signals, not stop signs, you can then start walking with them. Okay, so that's important to keep in mind. Okay, so in closing, Jon, this week I want you to choose one task you've been avoiding. Does anyone any tasks come to mind that you've been avoiding?
Yes, there are plenty of tasks that I have been avoiding.
Sure.
Yeah.
So again, I want
take my pick.
So I want you to choose one task that you've been avoiding.
Yep.
And rather than figuring out why you're not doing the task, I just want you to name the emotion underneath the avoidance.
Yeah.
So don't identify what the task is that you're avoiding and why you're avoiding it, because you can rationalize anything. I want you to name the emotion underneath that avoidance. And then next, step 2 is I want you to shrink your exposure. So agree to yourself that when you're faced with that task and you feel that discomfort or you feel that avoidance starting to creep in, give yourself permission to only work on that task for 5 minutes or only complete 5% of the task. And then agree to yourself that you're going to stop.
Yep.
Set your timer, set it for 5 minutes, and then agree that you're going to stop afterwards. And then finally, replace judgment of yourself with curiosity. And what I mean by that is ask, what does it feel like to move through this emotion, not around it? Or just ask yourself, why am I feeling this way about it? So again, to engage in tasks you've been avoiding, I'm using you as a hypothetical for everybody, but
totally
name the emotion underneath the avoidance of whatever task or project or conversation or whatever you're facing with. Shrink the exposure. That's called the graded exposure that we talked about. Give it 5 minutes or 5%. Then agree to stop. And then replace your judgment of why you're avoiding something with curiosity. And see how that works as far as your task initiation goes.
But I already know how it's going to work. It's going to work out great.
But what I want to leave people is a couple of things. And that is to keep in mind that avoidance is not a character flaw. Avoidance is actually emotional intelligence that has been misdirected. Okay?
Really?
Once you understand what your brain is trying to protect, you can then reassign it from protection to progression. Okay? Again, avoidance is emotional intelligence that has been misdirected. And then I want you to keep in mind that you don't have to conquer emotion to move. You just have to carry it forward. So too much we're focused on making the emotion go away before we start something, rather than just acknowledging that unpleasant emotions, to an extent, are going to be part of progressing forward.
This is part of the process.
So you have to be okay with carrying it forward and figuring out strategies to do that.
Yeah.
Okay? All right. So next week on the podcast, Jon, we're going to focus on what I call the friction index.
Ooh.
Yeah. And that relates to how to identify the hidden resistant points that quietly slow us down.
Ooh, I'm excited for that one.
Yep.
It's going to be good.
Yep.
That's going to be good.
So again, we're Nine Static. We're rebranded. So we're practical psychology that keeps you moving forward. Thanks for listening.